Hey everyone, Chris Gio here for another Beyond the Veil Quickie. I wanted to tackle the question, what does it feel like to die? What is death like? I was reading through some of the comments and Jennifer posted in one of our recent videos, oh my God, I journeyed last night. You just described my experience up to the pods, which first of all, thank you, Jennifer, for the confirmation that what we're actually seeing in these ayahuasca states are actual places that we're traveling to, if other people are seeing the exact same things, especially so close to each other without hearing each other's experiences. So awesome confirmation as far as that goes. But she also followed it up by saying, I was shown the essence of death. And a few people replied after that and they wanted to know more. And I remember having these experiences, these death experiences back in 2012, 2013. I've talked about them before, but I did want to tackle the question, what does it feel like to die? What is death like? What happens after death? I think I have some insight on this. So the big question obviously is, what is it like to die? And I've got to tell you that when I went through these ayahuasca experiences, it completely changed the game for me, because I'm no longer asking the question, what does death feel like? What is it like to die? But rather I understand what happens to consciousness afterwards. And so it helps me to live my life in a more dharmic way, because I understand that nothing can touch me until I have completed my mission here, unless I do something stupid like go jump off a bridge or something like that. But short of that, I'm walking a particular path, and even when death does come, it's not a scary experience. So back in 2012, 2013, I went through a series of experiences where I was watching through the eyes of people who had been murdered. And I would go so far as to say that they may have been past life experiences that I've had here in this incarnation. And unfortunately, it seems like I'm executed every single lifetime. Hopefully that won't be the case this time too. But I was in a field, for example, and I was shot in that field. And I remember seeing the trees as my soul was leaving the body, going into the other realm. And I'll talk about the other realm here in just a moment. I had other visions of being stabbed to death, of having my throat cut. And the most chilling of all is I was hung from a tree or nailed to a tree or tied to a tree or something like that in Egypt. And I think this was a very, very pivotal past life. I think it had to do with the uprising against Akhenaten. So what happens at the point of death is, when I saw these experiences, it happened multiple times. I mean, like 12, 13, 14 different types of experiences. And after the experience, everything happened in pretty much the exact same way. The way the soul left the body and traveled into, maybe you want to call it duat, maybe you want to call it the underworld, or I used to call it the in-between world, in between this state and the next state. But what happens is we have this safety mechanism in our existence, and it's almost as if it's a mercy that the Matrix has designed, or maybe we designed this into the Matrix, that we never actually experience death, but rather our soul jumps out of the body, or our consciousness jumps out of the body before the point of impact, before the major traumatic event happens. So how many of you have had these third-person memories where you almost get into a car accident and you remember it from a third-person perspective, or you got into a car accident and you remember it from a third-person perspective? I remember I was sitting on the highway one time. I'd come up to a place to where the traffic was stopping. The traffic stopped and some kid behind me came and just bam, just plowed right into me at 55 miles an hour, 60 miles an hour. And I hit the back of my head against this big thing that I had in the back, which was right behind the back seat, a big piece of metal from this machine that I had back there. And I remember it from a third person. I remember watching my head hit against that piece of metal. It's impossible for me to see the back of my head. But what happened is the spirit, the soul, knew that there was going to be a point of impact, so it jumped out of the body, so I didn't actually experience that, that impact. But that happens really in traumatic situations, but even more so during death. So what happens at the point of death is that the spirit or soul or consciousness or whatever, it leaves the body. And once it goes into the other plane, which is almost instantaneously, I never saw a traveling up to the sky. I never saw a traveling up to heaven. I never saw a traveling up. But what happened is it was more of a dissolvement of this particular physical world, dissolving and then turning into this other type of world. So this other world was, and I hate to say this, but it was kind of like a sewer system. I mean, it looked like an ethereal sewer system. And there was this river that's flowing there. And this river was made up of all these different consciences that were just they were stuck in this river, and they didn't really have a way to navigate through this river. They were just kind of bound by where this river was taking them, which was into the outlet of this huge, abyss that was swirling like this. And inside of this abyss, there were all these different exit points all up and down the line. And the souls, or the consciousness, they gravitated to wherever they needed to go. So if you have all your karmic baggage, if you've got all these attachments, if you've got all of this, then the soul becomes heavier, just like throwing a rock into a river. And the soul actually will start to gravitate down to a lower point within the abyss. If you don't have all that karmic baggage, if you don't have all of those things that you're carrying with you, then the soul can actually float a little bit higher in the river. But every single soul that I was watching was inside of this river, being recycled into this, I guess, the wheel of reincarnation. And it would go into this little exit point. Now, I never made it through the exit point because in my particular experience, the lesson that I was being taught was how to hover above that river and how to escape above that river. And number one, it takes dealing with all your karma and being a nice person and a genuinely good person. And sometimes, it takes turning the other cheek and things like that. But I've realized turning the other cheek is good. You turn the other cheek once, but that's it. See, Jesus turned the other cheek once, but he didn't turn the other cheek twice. So there does come a point when you have to pick up the sword and chop somebody's head off. But you live well for the most part. You do what you came here to do, and your soul becomes so light, or your soul essence becomes so light that you can actually hover outside of the river. And when you're hovering outside of the river, then you can navigate pretty much anywhere you want. I mean, you can always choose to go back into that wheel of reincarnation. You can choose to go into one of those entry points. You can choose which entry points you want to go to, or you can float above the river and float out of the reincarnation experience. But death is really nothing to be afraid of. It's the closing of a chapter and the opening of a new one. See, we are infinite, and there is no big bearded man in the sky that's going to judge you or send you to hell or do any of that. And we don't judge ourselves either. A lot of people say, well, God doesn't judge you, you judge yourself. But really, it doesn't even have to do with judgment. It has to do with how your soul is resonating at that particular moment. So if you're resonating at this low frequency carrying all this karma, you're going to be stuck into that wheel of reincarnation at the lower levels and exit at that lower levels. There's no external force that's judging you. It's all based on the weight that you're carrying. And it harkens back to the Egyptians, where they believe in the measuring of the heart and all of that stuff. But they had it almost right, but it's really the measuring of the weight of your own consciousness. So the question is your consciousness light as a feather, or is it heavy as a stone? Or have you developed wings where it's so light that you can actually navigate above and outside of that river of reincarnation and river of souls and navigate out? So, has anybody else had any near-death experiences, any post-death experiences, or any psychedelic experiences that gave you a clue as to what happens when we die? If so, please leave us a comment here. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Tune into the live shows Fridays and Saturdays, 7 o'clock to 10 o'clock Pacific time. And please, by all means, share your experiences too. And let me know, does this all resonate with you? Or do you think maybe these are just subjective experiences that we're each having? So on that note, kiss the one you love right now. You never know the last time is going to be. And we'll see you as we step even further beyond the veil.